Dustin, have you ever introduced yourself by saying what you do for work instead of who you are? Because apparently nowadays, your job title is your personality.
Right. And when you lose that title or don't feel like you're winning at work, it doesn't just hit your bank account, it hits your sense of self.
Welcome to the Slog Pod, where today we're asking, are we humans or just job descriptions that drink coffee?
Yeah, I kind of look at this and thinking way back in all of my work history, there's certainly been some times when I lost my job a long time ago where, wow, I think that was the first time that I realized that my job was my identity.
Which job was that?
I worked for a sporting goods retailer a long time ago. I mean, I'm thankful I got canned, but
That's another story.
that's another story. But at the time it becomes who you are. And now as I've aged, I realize just how problematic that can be and how I became so attached to that identity and what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredible how you lose that and what it meant to lose that. And that's just after job loss. The same thing happens with promotion, and you become more entrenched in what that identity is and what you need to be. So I think that there's many different examples of what that looks like. In that sense, I wasn't just mourning a job loss. I was mourning the person I thought I was.
Wow. That's interesting. So I was just at a wedding this past weekend, and there's always the small talk. Every single person I talked to that I was meeting for the first time, this doesn't apply to people I already knew, that's what they led with. They were either telling me what they did for a living and introduced themselves. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm a PO at whatever medical group. Or they were asking me, so what do you do for work?
Yep.
And not
Yeah. It's an interesting.
anything else. That's just where the focus goes to, which is kind of weird, but pretty normal, I think. I think of times when I've lost jobs or quit or whatever, having that question in my mind, like, how am I going to describe myself to people now? Who am I going to tell them I am? It's almost like losing a part of your last name or losing your last name.
Mm-hmm.
It's really bizarre. So what do you think that is? I think there's you said the word identity. I think there's a common tendency for us to fall into the trap of seeing our work as identity. And I think that comes from professional identity fusion, where people will internalize career success as their identity, as if to say, I'm valuable because of what I do. The title, the role, performance reviews, all the things we're given at our workplaces shape that sense of self-perception. So when we lose a job or we're struggling at work, maybe that's why we feel like we're losing a piece of ourselves, because of that fusion.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Absolutely.
And I also think there's this invisible emotional work or labor we do as part of our jobs. And by that, I mean, I'm referring to the constant hidden effort to prove we're good enough at work, whether it's staying late, not because we want to be productive, but we want to avoid feeling lazy or being seen as being not a hard worker, over preparing for meetings so we don't embarrass ourselves, smiling through stress so we appear professional and resilient, even when we're not feeling that way on the inside, saying yes to something when we're burned out so we can avoid being seen as not a team player. These are all forms of additional labor that we're giving away, that's taking away from our energy just to keep up that identity.
Yeah, think of how fake that is. How many times have you been in a work environment where I think most industries have high seasons and low seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's always been interesting that in high season, you're working beyond what you'd think are the required hours. You're always going above and beyond, and that's fine. However, in the low season, at least it seems for me, you're still working up until a certain time, no matter what. At least that's how it always was for me. And You go to 5 o'clock, whether you're working or not. You just show it.
Mm-hmm.
You're just staying there to stay there. You're not really getting anything done. There's certainly not a lot of productivity happening, but you're just playing the game.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with staying your whole shift. If you're required to be in the office or on the clock
Sure.
for a agreed upon amount of time, I think it's fair and reasonable that you would stay at work. But I think where we're going with this is when you're doing that and now that starts to fuse into who you present yourself as or how you identify, that can be unhealthy. And as we talked about that invisible emotional work we're doing, that's exhausting also. And we wonder why we burn out. Well, a lot of it isn't the actual work we've been assigned by our employer that's burning us out, even though that does probably play a part of it. I think another big part of it is just trying to keep up appearances. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it isn't work. It's basically survival theater.
Yeah.
Right? And the emotional labor people perform at work isn't just invisible, it's expected.
Yeah.
It's there all the time. So I think looking at it through our mental health lens that we continue to put things through, let's look at some of the patterns that might be driving the problem. So one, we'll always go back to cognitive distortions. So I'd start with stuff like labeling. Things like, quote unquote, I'm a failure after a mistake. That it individualizes something. It becomes our individual identified mistake. Personalization is another distortion. And it ties into that, meaning that negative feedback equals a quote unquote, I'm not good enough thing. We're playing that in our heads again. Emotional reasoning, basically feeling inadequate, becomes proof that you are inadequate. That's emotionally telling yourself that this is the evidence when it's not really evidence. Another big red flag that we've talked about in previous episodes are should statements, meaning, quote unquote, I should be able to handle this or something in that realm. Again, big red flags for things that can be going on and probably aren't healthy for us or the organizations we're in. I think some of those emotional patterns that come from that are chronic shame, performance anxiety, just overall general anxiety, emotional suppression to appear, quote unquote, professional, as you just talked about, gave a couple of examples of what that looks like. Grief, when identity is tied to the work is challenged. These are some of those patterns that pop up, and I think that they're happening all the time. There's also internal narratives, that story that we're playing through that seems to be pretty common. So things like I'm successful when others approve of me at work. That's that performance thing I'm talking about. We talk about all the time. We talk about putting on that mask and trying to get that approval. And as a matter of fact, that approval, oftentimes it's not the productivity or what you had as outcomes, but it's just how you were perceived that gets you the whatever that is, whether it's the bonus or the promotion or the title or whatever that is. It's a strange narrative, and that seems to be harming that organization. Another one is, if I struggle here, I'm defective. It's another one of those narratives. Or another one is the laziness one. Rest is laziness. Overwork is proof I'm valuable. We're not talking about outcomes here. We're talking about a narrative that we're playing through. And I think that that's what's very problematic in everything that we talk about, and why it's not just problematic for the individual. It's incredibly problematic for an organization because they're not talking about outcomes. We're talking about what's being performed. We're back to that theater again. Isn't that where we're at? To me, that's cause for concern, isn't it?
I think it is. And when you were just talking about specifically that overwork is proof that I'm valuable, I was just thinking about a job I had at one point where it was taken as a point of pride how much PTO you had in your bank. How like upside down is that? People were proud. I have 270 hours of PTO. Oh, I've gotten to the use it or lose it stage. And I'm the person who's carrying like a 2-day balance Because for me, I need that time away. I'm using my leave, that paid time off. But that, to me, I look at people who do that, engage in that performance, and then I look at the larger organizational effect of that. It just breeds itself. Now, all of a sudden, it becomes a competition not to see who can be the healthiest, almost the opposite.
Yeah, thanks for that. It reminded me, yeah, I've done that probably everywhere I've ever worked.
Yeah.
I think one of the last few positions I had, I remember getting about a year in and going, well, I've taken one day off. Right?
No, that's not good.
I remember working a decade for the Department of Veterans Affairs and looking at my sick leave, and no, I had never taken any. I don't think I ever took any sick leave ever. That whole time. And what's really funny about that, it's not funny, it's tragic, is that you don't get paid out for that.
Right.
When you quit or you're done, you don't get paid out for that unless you retire out of the VA. And I remember thinking, well, that was stupid.
I agree. That was dumb.
Well,
you should have used
what the hell was I thinking? But there was a belief, and probably a very unhealthy belief there, that existed, that if I took it, it was saying something about me and my identity as a worker.
And you weren't I'm sure you weren't the only person doing it.
No, I'm sure I wasn't.
So I would probably guess the majority of people had that attitude. And when a majority of people have that attitude, well, guess what? That now becomes a personality feature or an identity feature of the culture, not just the individuals now.
You know what I remember too, as we try to figure out the poor outcome of all that, as we talked about what the organizational poor outcome of that was, I think initially you'd think that that's great for the organization because you actually didn't take the time. Actually, it wasn't more productive. I bet if you added all that up, I just gained resentment for the organization. More than anything, I was never in the healthiest place I could have been when I was there, and I should have been taking that time. My productivity, my efficiency would have been better. And I think that that's what we miss, and that's really hard to quantify into serious numbers.
Right.
So I think maybe that's what causes our organizations not to see that that's a cultural problem. Because initially you think, well, there's nothing wrong with that because that's good. You just spent more time at work.
That's right.
But actually it caused me to quit. I would argue. It caused me to say, I'm done.
And for the time you were there, the organization wasn't getting the best version
of me.
Of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there was a cost there too. But you're right. That's hard to quantify. Certainly.
Yeah.
I feel like it's become this thing, or at least it has in every job I've had, where everyone's walking around wearing name tags that say employee first, human second. And then we're all scratching our heads wondering why we're miserable at work.
Exactly. And we've confused performance management with self-worth management.
Yes. Which are two very different things.
Yeah.
And that explains why if you get a bad performance review, it can ruin your whole month or maybe even your relationship with the company. It's not taken as feedback. It's taken as a personality assessment. We take that personally. When we get a bad review, a 4 instead of a 5. Ouch.
We've all felt that, I think. Or if you haven't, you're a robot.
Or you're just a top performer.
Or you're just a top performer. I'm sure those people exist.
Definitely. So what are some of those? We're talking about the cultural, organizational component here. What drives that in our larger systems? One thing I'd say is our macro culture really pushes the grind equals worth narrative. We talk about grind culture all the time. That's really what that is. It's the culture of putting pressure on all of us to buy into this narrative that the harder you grind, the more you're worth. And that may be true in the role you're in, but are we not so much more than just the jobs we do? At least that's what we're trying to say here, I hope.
Yeah, we're so much more, and there's something wrong with that worth piece.
Yeah.
How we see ourselves, that self-esteem, or am I worthy, am I enough type of thought. There's something distorted about that that's not healthy for us individuals or our organizations. I also think there's a social media, obviously, in this day and age, is amplifying the curated professional success, what our stories look like, what we're presenting. It's absolutely asinine, if you ask me. Things are crazy how far that's become as far as what we put. Think of your LinkedIn stuff and what you see on LinkedIn.
I know. I was just thinking of my own LinkedIn. Yeah.
And just titles and all of that, it is out of control. And the worth that people see through that, it's really hard to not look at that or to not put weight to it. And how much weight is that putting on us every single day?
Yeah. Well, it's not just social media. Going back to my wedding banter story with the chit chat.
Yeah.
People introducing themselves and all of the letters behind their names as their introduction at a wedding.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's as you talk about that, I'm not concerned about what do you do? I don't know that it should be first.
Right. Human first.
Yeah.
Job title second.
So it's interesting that we've gone that direction. I don't know. Wow. This is really strange to me.
Well, those organizations do have a tremendous impact on that identity process as we build it for ourselves. Again, given the titles, the awards, the constant evaluations we're getting, it seems natural that we would internalize those things and fuse those into our identity. We spend 40 plus hours a week in that role. I don't think it's a character flaw that people do it. I just think it's something we need to be aware of so we can maybe balance that out to be more human, less employee, especially when we're off the clock.
Absolutely. Yeah. It seems companies don't just want your labor. They want your identity. That's why quitting feels like losing your whole self.
And that's a big one too. So after I left my last job, one of the first questions that I asked myself was, how am I going to rebrand myself? Isn't that insane? Why can't I just be me? I should just be me. If a company wants me for me, great. But I'm so worried about what my brand is, what my reputation.
But it's become so ingrained in everything. I don't know that you have a choice, because from the organizational side, that's what they're looking for too.
Right. They don't want your labor.
They want your identity.
Yeah.
So I don't blame you for feeling that way whatsoever. I think that's normal to feel it. I guess what we're saying is it doesn't seem healthy for individuals and ultimately the organization to even want that. They don't, right?
Yeah. What if we just started looking at it a different way? Instead of rewarding the grind, reward the balance. Reward the health. I don't see a lot of companies doing it.
Well, then that's a lot bigger discussion, right? Because we're talking about outcomes. We're talking about productivity. We're talking about efficiency. And that's all companies in a capitalist system. That's what you're going towards. And I think that there is motivation there.
Sure.
So I don't think that that's wrong. I'm not sure what that looks like.
Well, it's certainly something to explore.
It is.
I think. And if you're sitting in a leadership position and you're listening to this, that would be a good question to ask. What would that look like?
Right.
What would a healthier balance be?
Can we align those company productivity outcome interests with the human interest of each individual?
Yes. And I love that you use the term alignment, because I think alignment is an even better term than balance, because balance implies that there's a 50-50 element, but alignment just means bringing those things into fusion with one another, not identity and job, but health and output. This is good with those fusing.
This is a big one. And I think that, to me, this is one of the biggest thoughts that we should really consider, is that alignment, because I believe, and I think I could show that through any number of statistics, that your healthier employee as an individual is better for your company productivity and outcomes.
Because they're getting a better version of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But somehow along the way, we've taken a shortcut in our organizations and just go, well, what is your productivity now? It seems we're very short-sighted in our organizations and how we look at that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how many organizations actually broaden that lens to look at that and are willing to say, wait a minute, what if we did align the interests? What if we did align the health of each? What would that look like? And I'm willing to bet it'd be better outcomes across the board. But this is a big thought. We're taking a big leap here. And I don't know many organizations or companies that are doing this.
Well, and they're not likely to unless individuals within those organizations start doing it, at least for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So some questions for people to consider or just reflect on. Ask themselves, who am I outside of my job? I think that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I when I'm not at work? And while I am at work, what invisible labor am I performing? And what is it costing me? I think that's another great reflective question.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest question is, when did we start believing that productivity is the only measure of our worth? Why? Why do we do that? Aren't we so much more than just our productivity?
Well, that's a tough one.
As humans, I mean.
Again, I think we've become so used to what our systems, these organizations, companies have put on us, that that's become the only thing we see, is that our value is measured by that productivity. And I'm not even saying that's wrong necessarily. Again, I feel there's a balance there. It's not just productivity. And I would argue even the productivity would be better if we also had the health individually. And even how we're taking that on in our organizations now is tough, because we point at the individual and say, you messed up oftentimes. And it's not that, it's the system that they're in that's screwed up. So maybe the work isn't to succeed at your job. Maybe it's to stop confusing your job with who you are, or find some fluidity in that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
Yeah. And that is a big slog.
It is. We're going against what's historically occurred. And again, I'm not taking on capitalism. I think that's a good motivator for a lot of things, but maybe there's a healthy
alignment
there. Maybe there is a different way of seeing things. And again, I would argue that finding that alignment is more efficient, is more productive, is more innovative, allows flexibility, change, growth. Doesn't it?
Yeah. And it allows you to start reclaiming more of your humanness, which I think we could all use more of that.
I agree.
Certainly. Well, if you're out there and you feel like you're faking it just to feel worthy at work, maybe you're not broken. Maybe the system is. That's what we're asking today.
Yeah. If losing your job feels like losing yourself, you didn't fail. You're just made to believe that's who you are.
Good things to think about.
It is.
Well, thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep slogging.
Cheers.
Cheers.